Boy, it is a windy day. What's going on, guys? Oregon Motorcycle back today with another episode. Today we are doing the 5,000 mile review. So guys, thanks for tuning in. A couple things before we get started. I want to give a special shout out to my recent contributors to the channel through the Buy Me a Coffee fund. There's a link posted down in the description below if you guys want to contribute to the channel. I went and bought another item with the money. I told you guys all that money that's being accumulated there is going to go back into the bike channel slash whatever you guys want to call it. So I got another part. It's actually an OEM Honda part that's going to be arriving early next week, so stay tuned for that video. First person on the list today is Crystal Striegel. Crystal, super appreciate your contribution to the channel. Goes a long ways. The next contributor is Samuel Cullen. Samuel, I super appreciate your contribution to the channel. Goes a long ways towards helping this channel grow and that kind of thing. If you guys are interested in doing that, like I said, click on the link below in the description. And in the description, you guys will find links to some of the upgrades that I've done to this bike and some of my gear that I use that I'm going to be going over here with. So without further ado, let's get started. So I am right at like 4,980-ish miles right now as of today. Today is Friday, May the 8th. The reason I'm doing this video today is because I'm gonna have I have a busy week planned ahead. Tomorrow I'll be up in Washington, most likely, way up just south of Seattle, doing some off-roading with some other bikers, so stay tuned for that video. Just to give you guys a little history, I took delivery of this bike this year on January 20th. So I've had the bike, a little over 4 months now, or right at 4 months, something like that. And I put 5,000 miles on it in that amount of time. I've done everything with this bike, from commuting, off-roading, a lot of wet weather travel, mud, snow. I put it through the ringer pretty much. And just recently I've put new tires on it. I got about 4,000 miles out of the back tire. So I just put the Shinko 705s on, which are a great improvement compared to the stock tire. The stock tires that come on this bike are okay. They're decent all the way. I guess they're decent all the way around. They're not that good off-road. And like I said in one of my other videos, I said that I wish that Honda went with a dedicated tire when they released this, whether it be a dedicated street tire or a dedicated like 50/50 tire. The tires that come on this bike are like, they're just not enough on either side. So yeah, I did 5 things I love and 5 things I hate about this bike. If you guys haven't seen that video, check it out. I'm gonna list them up here in the top here, and I talk about tire offerings and what I feel that Honda could have done to improve the performance of the bike out of the gate. So so yeah, new tires. You, depending on how you ride, you're going to get about 4,000 to 5,000 miles out of the back tire stock. I got about 4,000, and the front tire you should probably be able to squeeze, you know, probably 10,000 miles out of the front tire, but I went ahead and replaced both. Obviously, I've done the first 2 maintenances. I've done videos on them. I'm going to continue to do all the maintenance on the bike throughout the time I have the bike. So I've done you know, the first oil change and that stuff, and just done some checks here and there. This is like a freestyle video, you guys. I'm just sitting here and I'm going to kind of go over things that pop into my head. If you guys have any questions about the bike and what I've experienced in the last 5,000 miles, go ahead and post that down in the comments below and I'll answer it best I can. So just going over a couple things that I've done to the bike. As you can see, I've got the hand guards that I put on. I've got the spikes. I got the RAM mount here for the phone. I put a USB charger in here that displays the voltage, so you can see your real-time voltage here, and it has 2 USB outputs, and it's got a little waterproof cover. It's been working good. This bike has set in the rain. It's been through several washes, and I haven't had any problems with this. I have heated grips here. Here's the adjuster right here. The bike. Okay, so just short and sweet, simple. This bike is awesome. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this is probably the best all-around bike you can buy. Okay, all around. bike that you can buy for $7,000. MSRP on this bike was $699.99, and that's with the ABS. I believe it's right around $6,500 without the ABS. So the reason I say that it's the best all-around bike for $7,000, if you start comparing some of the other bikes that are in that same price range, it's going to be hard to find the versatility and the comfort. So the comfort on this bike is superb. You know, first time I got on it, I felt like I was sitting on a couch. First time some of my buddies got on it, they said the same thing. It was like, oh man, I feel like I'm sitting on a couch. It's very comfortable seat. Now I will admit that after about 2 to 3 hours on the bike, I do feel a little bit in my butt, which is not the end of the world. The bike's very easy to ride and stand up at the same time, so you can just stand up for a while if you want, as long as you're not on the freeway. I don't recommend standing up on it at high speeds. Some complain that the pegs are a little high. Now that might be true if you're taller. I'm 5'8", 5'9" somewhere in that area, and I weigh about 160 pounds, and the bike fits me like a glove. So now I can't flat foot it with both feet. Okay, I can flat foot it with one foot down, or I can tippy toe with both feet down. So it's not too tall. You know, there's other bikes out there. There's actually one that I have in mind that I'm really curious about riding that can compare to this bike, and it actually comes in a little cheaper, and that would be the KTM 390 Adventure. That bike has just come out, and I'm really dying to test drive that bike. That's going to be competition with this bike, I know. It's real close in horsepower and capabilities, and it's got extra features that this bike doesn't have. But what this bike has right here that no other bike has is the Honda reliability. Honda's known for their reliability, and I think you might pay a little extra for that. It kind of seems to go across the board for all their bikes, but it's definitely worth it. I haven't had any problems whatsoever in the 5,000 miles that I've ridden this bike, and the first 3 KTM 390 Adventure review videos that I've watched, all 3 had some kind of issue during the review process with that bike. So whether it was Bluetooth connectivity or if it was a problem with the ABS, I think some of them had problems with the shifter or something. So it's just, you know, KTM doesn't have the best reputation for being reliable, and neither does that 390 engine. But I'm not knocking the bike because I've never ridden it. I am interested in the bike. I love the features that bike has. I wish Honda, in the next improvement on the CB500X, I wish that they would include some of those features. That bike comes with a quick shifter and a couple other items. I think it might have a traction control possibly. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't done that much research on the bike, but the reason I keep mentioning that bike is because I think that's going to be the main competition for this bike. Possibly the Versus 300 might be, and a lot of people I think thought in the beginning that the T7, the Tenere 700 Yamaha, might be competition for this bike. I think that the T7 is in a different class than this bike, but if you guys disagree, you can post that in the comments below. So I want to talk to you guys about the gearing of this bike. You know, I mentioned in the first video, I think when I first got this bike, that I might switch to the 16-tooth pinion, and I know a lot of you guys have. And a lot of you guys swear that it is the best upgrade for the bike, and I'm gonna have to go against the grain on this one and say that this bike is geared perfectly for its weight and its horsepower right from the factory, and I'm gonna tell you why. Now, a lot of people put that 16-tooth pinion on because they feel the first gear is too low. It's too low of a first gear, and I will admit that the first gear, it is pretty low on this bike, but it doesn't take long to get used to. I mean, in fact, within the first week you ride it, you're going to get used to it, and it's going to be like nothing. What they don't consider, I feel, is the other end of the realm, which would be the top speed in 6th gear. Top speed on this bike with no luggage and just me, that's a 160-pound rider, I've hit 106. And at 106 miles an hour, the shift light rev limiter, whatever you want to call it, there's a shift light on this bike, just starting to flash right there at 106, 105 miles per hour. And it takes quite a bit of time to go from 95 to 106. Okay, now when I'm loaded up with gear, okay, and when I did this speed test, I wasn't fully loaded. I didn't have all my gear on me, but I had my bags on and I had some gear in there, and it weighted the bike down a little bit, and it was noticeable. I had my tank bag too. I had problems getting up to 90 miles an hour on that. Okay, so if you are, say, 180 pounds and you load this up with panniers and you put some weight in there and you have a 16-tooth pinion, you might only be able to get up to 85 miles an hour. Now, if you ride bike, say in California, you guys know that the cruising speed sometimes on freeways is 90 miles an hour, 85 to 90. That's no exaggeration. Sometimes here in Oregon, even where we drive slower, you know, it might be 70, 75, 80 miles an hour sometimes. You know, it's rare. But what you're doing by putting the 16-tooth pinion on is you're decreasing the performance on the top end. And you know, people say the advantages of it is, again, it's making first gear a little more manageable, and the cruising speed in sixth gear, they're saying it drops the RPM, say 400 to 600 RPMs. Well, again, like I was saying, you're just decreasing the performance on the other end. If you can't get to top speed with luggage on with a 15-tooth, you're not going to be able to get nowhere near that with the 16-tooth. So okay, so the other thing too is the low first gear is really handy when you're off-roading. I really like the low first gear when I'm doing some technical stuff off-road, like if I have to cross over a tree or a tree branch or go up a curb. Yesterday, a guy had a truck pulled out on the street and was blocking the whole street. I just hopped up on the curb and got on the sidewalk and then bounced off the curb. That would have been a little more difficult not having that super low first gear. So, you know, this is an off-road capable bike, and I feel that, in my opinion, it needs that super low first gear. So I guess if you don't go off-road and you never ride above, say, 70, 75 miles an hour, I could see how you might entertain the idea of putting a 16-tooth pinion on. But if you guys ride high speed on the freeways and you're going to do off-road, I don't recommend putting a 16-tooth pinion on here. Now, if somebody wants to send me a 16-tooth, send me a 16-tooth and I'll do a back-to-back comparison video on it and show you guys how you're going to lose performance on the top end of the bike. There you go. The bike's geared perfectly out of the box. This bike has LED lights, and I've added some auxiliary lights here. The LED lights are pretty decent on this bike, but I went ahead and added the auxiliary lights so I do a lot of night riding and out in the countryside, and there's a lot of wildlife at night, so I like to have these, and I have them pointed out a little bit so I can kind of see the sides of the roads. Again, link down in the description for those. So I'll point out a couple things that could use improvement, but at the same time, you know, if you improve stuff, then you might affect something else on the other side. So I guess my only really main gripe about this bike is the front end stability, and that's one thing I was concerned with before I bought the bike, because I knew, you know, this type of bike with this rake and this skinny tire up here, this largest front tire, it's just not as stable at high speeds as, say, it would be like a sport bike or what have you. Now, I will say that once I put a larger front tire, the stock tire is a 110, and I put a 120 on here, and it did make the front end a little more stable. And I have a theory here. If you guys look, like, are these built-in winglets here? Right? So winglets could help with downforce and stability at high speeds. So I'm thinking that maybe this fairing, it'd be cool to do a test if I took those fairings off and then went and did some high-speed travel and just to see, but I have a feeling that this was designed to maybe make the front of the bike a little more stable at high speeds. I'm not 100% sure. So I would say, yeah, a little bit unstable at higher speeds, but it's something you get used to. You know, you get a little bit of that wiggle here and there, but it's nothing major. And when it's not windy and you're in clean air, there's no traffic around, it's pretty damn stable. But if you get in traffic at, you know, say heavy traffic or around large semi trucks at higher speeds, you can feel the front end getting pushed around, getting, you know, a little bit wobbly or whatever. But again, it's not that big of a deal. So if you guys are concerned with that, I recommend test driving the bike and take it on the freeway and see. It's exactly what I did when I did it. That's the first thing I wanted to do, was take it on the freeway to see, you know, how stable it was at higher speeds. So the other complaint, which I've talked about in the 5 things that I hate about this bike, I believe, is the front suspension tune. I know it's, you know, it's a budget bike, so you're gonna have budget suspension components and that kind of thing. I'm not necessarily complaining about the budget suspension. I'm complaining about the tune that the front end has. The dampening is really soft on this bike, so it tends to dive a little bit more than usual on hard braking, and it's easier to bottom out off-road. Now, the other side to that is better traction at higher speeds on bumpy surfaces, right? Because it can move faster and that kind of thing. I think they could have increased the dampening just a smidget to help out a little bit overall. Now, there's a tip that I got online that somebody told me that if I added like 15 milliliters of fork oil to each fork, that would increase the dampening further down the compression stroke, which I haven't done yet. I'm kind of on the fence about doing that. I want to do it, but it's something I might do. And of course, you guys, there's Rally Raid upgrades you can do. You can spend thousands of dollars on upgrades to this bike. I don't see myself ever doing that in the future, although I am going to do crash bars and skid plate, center stand, that kind of thing, just to get a little more off-road worthy. But as far as suspension goes, you know, I'm not going to be single tracking this bike or jumping it, so it kind of is what it is at this point. But yeah, the front forks are a bit soft on this bike. Another thing I want to hit on, guys, something that's pretty cool about this bike, is the fuel mileage. The fuel mileage is superb on this bike. I'd say overall, I average about 60 to 65 miles per gallon on this bike, and that's kind of like an all-around fuel mileage for me. And that includes kind of everything I do. Now, if I'm just putting around town or taking the back roads to work, I can get it to like 70, maybe 75 miles per gallon, that's pretty cool. And then on the other side of that, when I'm riding the twisties with my buddies or whatever and just hammering the whole bike for the whole day, I'll get around 50 miles to the gallon. So that's a pretty good improvement. Than say, like, you know, you're riding a sport bike, which might get 30, you know, depending. If you're riding a leader bike, you might get like 20, 25 miles to the gallon. So the fuel mileage on this is excellent fuel mileage. I love that aspect of the bike, and it has a large, like 4.5 gallon tank, I believe, so you can go quite a bit of distance on it before you have to fuel up, and it's got a fuel gauge and all that stuff too. The cluster on this bike is pretty sweet. I like it. At first, when I first got it, I thought, oh, it's going to be a little difficult to read or whatever, a little bit hard, but everything's easy to read on here. And you know, I really like the cluster on here. So yeah, guys, if you guys are interested in purchasing this bike and you still have more questions, like I said, comment down below and ask me. I'll try to answer them best I can. I highly recommend, if you guys are interested in this bike, to go test drive it. It's a great all-around bike. Like I said, I can't think of anything in this price range that does everything as well as this bike. It's great on the twisties. You guys have probably seen some of my videos of me ripping up the twisties with sport bikes, and then it does decent off-road. I haven't done a lot of off-road, but I've done enough to get a feel for it. And a lot of that's, you know, tire dependent on, you know, traction and whatnot. And like I said, the suspension, it will bottom out. But again, I'm kind of learning how to ride dirt, so I'm kind of leaning back more and using the throttle more to help prevent the front end from bottoming out. But I mean, honestly, overall, I mean, as far as the stock bike goes, that would be my only complaint, would be the front suspension. And then on the street, at high speeds, I would say a little bit unstable in the front, but nothing to worry about. It's just, I'm comparing these to sport bikes. Yeah, I've ridden sport bikes all my life, basically. Not since my early 20s, over 20 years, off and on. And so this is my first adventure bike. This is my first foray into the adventure bike scene. So yeah, guys, this is an awesome all-around bike. I feel it is a great deal for what you're paying. Of course, it's a Honda. You've got that reliability. The styling of this bike is excellent. That's another cool thing I forgot to hit on, the styling. I love the way this bike looks, and what's cool is I get compliments like across the whole range of the age groups. With my sport bikes, usually it was the younger crowd that would, you know, come up to me and be like, oh man, that's a good looking bike, and blah 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 blah. Well, on this bike, I got kids, adults, young adults, old men, all kinds of people coming up to me and going, man, that's a good looking bike, what is that, Bob? It's kind of cool getting those compliments from everybody. So guys, if you guys are liking my content and want to hang around and be part of the crew, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you would, if you liked it. And until next time, Oregon Motorcycle.